Hey everybody, welcome to the Purpose People podcast. My name's Darryl Irwin and here is Stephanie Buckley from the Solve Co. Hi.
I'm good, thank you.
So today we're going to talk about a little bit about failure, because often as entrepreneurs, business owners, people like, we don't talk about failure, we avoid it. You know, we want to be successful. We've got our Instagram stuff and we want to show everybody how great we are. But you exist, as in your company exists, to help people through those tough times. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So how, out of all the jobs you could do in the world, did you end up doing something like this?
Well, so my background, I did business at university and I'd done roles. I often worked for sort of owner-managed businesses or quite sort of entrepreneurial. I do my own sort of contracts. And so I got kind of good insight into the world of business. Then I worked as a business advisor. And then I met Gareth, who's my husband, who I'm sure you'll be speaking to at some point. And it was partly, you know, like in anything in life, we hadn't planned to set up our own business, but we fell into working on a contract together and discovered that we worked really well together, different personalities. So I'll talk about that in a bit. But because of that, we realized we worked really well together and we wanted to move from the north to the south. And Gareth being a northerner, it was difficult. People didn't want to take an opportunity or like take a risk, I guess, and employ someone sort of from outside the area they didn't know that was newly qualified. And he was newly qualified as an insolvency practitioner. Yeah. I let him share his background. But when he couldn't find a role down here, he could easily get a role up in Manchester, but I wanted to move down here because we had our daughter was unwell at the time. We wanted to be near family. So we wanted to move down. And so I said, well, my background's a business advisor. I'm entrepreneurial. You've just got these new qualifications as an insolvency, in insolvency at the time. Why don't we just start something ourselves? So it was, you know, like anything in life, it wasn't necessarily what we planned. In fact, even as a business advisor, I always used to talk to businesses about startup and growth. You know, in all my training, we never covered closure. No. So it was a new area to me. But yeah, so Gareth, as I say, so I can tell you his journey. But so he was working on that side. And so that's how sort of the business itself came about. I had more of a personal experience as well that I can tell you about in a minute.
Yeah, because I think often when we're talking about businesses, this whole realm of start up and get going or whatever, but then the failure rate of businesses is quite high, but no one ever focuses on the failure rate of businesses and what happens if you fail and what does failure look like, because you'd often hear people say, well, if I fail at this, I'll never be able to be a director ever again, or I'll never be able to start a business again. And it's just a one-time hit and then my life is over. And yet you'll hear the big publicized stories of someone like Richard Branson and all that. And say, oh, we've failed loads of times. Well, boy, how can this guy do it? And yet I feel my whole life is on the line. So just tell us a little bit about your personal background, because I think that often, what that's done is created this essentially the empathy piece. Yeah. For what people are going through now. Massively.
So I was in financial difficulty. So I was around 30, just a little bit younger. And I got unwell. My doctor said, look, you may have to accept that you're never going to work again. And, you know, at that time I had a normal amount of debt. I had a really good job. I had a credit card. But the thought of never being able to work again just was massive. And that in itself is a massive toll on your mental health, especially when you're like me. I love working, I love learning. And suddenly I didn't know what I can do. So, you know, that was just me personally. And so if you're actually a business owner who's potentially facing closure or financial difficulties, it's even worse, because I think you've probably got employees, plus you've probably got a family, and that you are thinking, oh my goodness, it's the end of the world. But because I've been through there and I understand, yes, I wasn't running a business, but it was financial challenges. I didn't know how I was going to pay for things. And I know that it just kind of feels like the walls are closing in and you lose all options. And because I've been there, that was the empathy I believe that I've got with the business owners that come to us, and to sort of say to them, do you know what, actually, it was a great thing for me, because you know, it's like anything in life. Once you hit rock bottom, there's only one way back. Yeah. And actually, that, like you say, I've got the empathy for other people, but I've been there. You know, I didn't at the time. I just didn't know where life was going to go. But actually, because of that, it meant I left the job I was in, which, I was close to burnout anyway, which probably was what triggered my health issues.
Yeah.
I then focused on my health, so I got myself well. I went on, we've now got 4 children, which at the time, there's no way I could have even, probably got pregnant now. So it changed my world. I met Gareth. We've had 4 children and we started our own business. So that experience literally flipped my life, and then for the better. So from that point onwards, everything has just got better and better. And a lot of that has been to do with sort of the mindset work. I'm really into personal development, neuro-linguistic programming, and knowing that there is an energy out there, whether you believe in the science, you believe in God, there is something greater out there. And actually, sometimes when you just surrender, everything's broken, and you just ask for that bit of help, which is what I did at the time. And then my life has just got better and better. But you have to, as well as, having that belief and that faith, you have to take the steps, the 3D concrete action. And I think that's what people do a lot of, like manifestation, or, they might say prayers, but you actually have to get out there, I believe, and then take action.
Yeah.
And for the business owners that come to us, it's an insolvency practice. We're regulated, we're licensed, all those important things, the practical steps. But I can help with that well-being side. Or Gareth always says, what's the first thing he says is, what do you want to do next? So we're thinking about where you're going next. We're putting in an action plan of how we're going to get through this. And it sort of creates the whole package. And I think that's where our business is different, is because we're not just saying, right, we'll do the legal process and your business is closed. And we're not just doing like the business coaching or the well-being. We're actually trying to put the whole thing together to say that the client, the person, the business owner is probably a mum, a dad, a partner. They've got employees that they care about. And there's this whole piece around how we then help them to recover from what they've been through, as well as the insolvency legal process. So that, can you see how it's sort of my experience again fits with how we've approached insolvency or business closure?
Yeah, and I think what the key thing is that you don't forget the human behind the process. And I think so often the process dictates, the situation and ignores the human and Absolutely. The human story and the family and the people that are involved or whatever. And I think having that backstory and having that understanding and having that, what may seem the end of the world, what I love about what you say is that you want to help keep people in business, not necessarily that business, but in business generally, is kind of the heart behind what you both do. And I think that's refreshing, whilst helping people navigate something that they never really thought that it might be experiencing.
Nobody wants to think they're going to end up there, but like we say, statistically 3 out of 5 new businesses will probably face closure. And that's what's really odd, because like you're saying about Richard Branson before, in America it's like celebrated. It's almost like tick, done that, therefore, because you learn by going through a business failure or business, it's not really failing, is it? There's no failure, only feedback. But it's true, if you look at what you could have learned from the experience and use that for your next venture, whether that's going into employment because you're going to be a better employee, because you're going to have a better understanding of how the whole business works and the pressure your boss is under, or if you're going back to launch another business, if you take all that knowledge with you, I think it's better than any business degree you can do. And like you say, our sort of vision is to be like the first name that you think of when businesses are in financial difficulty for like owner managed businesses. But the second, or just equally as important, is to help remove that stigma around business failure. Because if people talked about it more, so many people are in debt. It has a massive impact on sort of your mental health. And at the moment, with lots of costs going up and all the different things, I'm not going to go all the things that have happened in recent years. But actually, if we all talked about it, we could all help to make a more successful economy. We could help have better businesses. But it does mean that people have to talk about it and be open about what, the struggles that they're facing. Really. Yeah,
and I think that's it. I think we're very in the whole entrepreneurial journey when we talk about failure from a mindset perspective. I worked with this client, it didn't go well, and I did this, but we never get to that point where business fails. Now what do I do? And I think if you knew what to expect, it wouldn't be so much of a crisis. It's not to say you're negligent where you just think, whatever, I'll spin up something else. It's, okay, there might be other ways around this to keep going with the vision. And, and as an entrepreneur, for example, you think several different ways around the mountain. That's just the natural way that they work. But if you know what paths around the mountain to go round ahead of time, it would save a lot of time potentially.
Yeah. And to find those paths, you need to talk to people who have that knowledge. And when you're under pressure, you can often only see one path because they can't see the wood for the trees. So if people felt comfortable talking at an earlier stage, but sometimes like we have examples where the business owner's gone to talk to the bank and the bank's immediately frozen their bank account. It's like, well, how's that going to help?
Yeah.
So knowing who to talk to as well is really important. And, we do live now with culture with, Instagram, like you were saying before as well, that only the positive stories and things are put onto social media. And, that's great, but it leaves people thinking that they're not doing as well as others and they haven't got the same struggles. And actually, people really do. Like, life is about balance. Everything, I believe, in life is about balance.
Yeah, I mean, we had someone earlier, on the podcast set today, and they're talking about the Olympics, and they had a whole team under there, and they got to the Olympics. But the point of it is, they got to 13th and missed the final by 1 millimeter. Yet he doesn't see it as failure because he remembered the goals of what he set out to, which was to get to the Olympics. And sometimes when you may have failed that business, the point is you take a step back and you look back and go, well, my whole success or the whole journey was just to try it.
Yeah.
And just see what would happen. And it may not have worked out, but as you said, it's a learning experience to go, well, let me try something else.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely this stigma where if you fail, that's it. And probably we'll talk a bit more with Gareth about is that what happens if you fail and where could you go from there. But what I love about your story is that even just talking to you now is like you could talk. Do you know what I mean? You could literally have a decent conversation, like rather than, as you said, sometimes the bank could be, well, we're going to shut you down and you've got to do this. And if you don't pay this by this, it's like, whoa, hang on a second. And often I think that person on the end of the telephone's never taken the risk in their life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing you have is that empathy piece with the individual.
And you just don't, like most people that come to us, like, so with me, when I was in financial difficulty, it was ill health. I didn't see it coming. I was only sort of 30. I thought I was pretty invincible at the time, you do. And people that come to see us, it's been things that ill health for them. Someone's died suddenly, they're going through something at home that actually, but there's no way they don't get sick pay, and it's difficult to keep the business running, especially when you're probably such a key person in it. And that's what I think, again, people think about business closure and they see these, there's always the exception to the rule. The people, like you say, that set up a business and like aim to run up debts and, not pay them off. And there's always exceptions to the rule, but all of our clients that come to us, are good at running their business. They're often say, an electrician, they're out working really hard, long hours, but they're not collecting in the money that's owed properly because they're entrepreneurial, they're hard workers, they're good at what they do. But where do they go to learn about how to actually run a business? At school, so when Gareth and I started the business, we were saying on the way up here, looking back, at first, so we just had a new baby. We potentially, baby number 3 had just arrived, looking back. And he was there, baby in a sling, taking those initial calls. And I was cover teaching, because I'm a teacher, so I was cover teaching business studies up at a local school, just to keep the money coming in. That was the balance. That was the truth of it. So there was him trying to say, oh yeah, with this professional business on the phone with the baby. So actually he said it was quite good, a sort of an icebreaker. But I was teaching business studies to these students, teaching GCSE, and they were just being taught to memorize this text from a book. Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to teach this. This isn't real. Yeah. I know there's a difference between, I remember specifically a wage and a salary, but in the real world, does it matter? The point is, are you going to get paid at the end of the month and how much? What's it mean? But when I first met Gareth, so before we set up the business, I actually taught at the Peter Jones Enterprise Academy in Oldham. It was brilliant. Absolutely loved it. Still in touch with a lot of my students. They're doing well. And, I was teaching real entrepreneurial skills to young people who actually might not have been doing that great at school, so they were doing something a little bit more different, but they were getting real world skills.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. So I sort of volunteered for things like the business initiative in schools, and there were some other sort of programs, Young Enterprise, that I've volunteered because I really am genuinely passionate about that, because I think actually if we equip our young people with this and that sort of not being afraid to go out and try and go, look, it might not work out the first time. It might, some of them do, but it might not. And if it doesn't matter, It's
an interesting one, because I reflect back on my journey, like the only reason I learned sales is it was a need. So I literally, my dad would make this statement like, if you want name trainers, son, go and get them yourself, and you're like, well, yeah, I do. I don't want to be wearing the ones that you bought in Asda or whatever it was at the time. And so I literally just take a bucket, put some things in there like, sponges and a bit of washing up liquid or whatever, and literally go knocking on the door. And I think I initially went along with someone. I think that was probably the first thing. I tried it with someone and I thought, I could make more money if I did this myself. I was probably better at it than him. And literally I just went out and started knocking on doors. And even as a youngster, I learned the power of sales, customer service, all that sort of stuff by just trying, just knocking on the door. And I realized that, well, it's a 15-year-old kid, or however I was, maybe 14, wants to wash my car or save me a job. And I remember back then, I'm showing my age now, this has got to be about 30 odd years ago now. They were paying me like £5, £10 a car, and then you can drive to these ones now where you're paying £5, £10 to get clean. But I just learned the power of, connecting, being brave, knocking on that door. It was always the knock on the door and that, who's going to come to the door? And then you hear the dog, you're like, oh no, and yet it was like, oh, do you want your car washed? So you have to go for the ask. And then they go, yeah, okay, fine. And then it was just learning to manage the money. They would give you loads of cash and you got and you don't want to lose it. And it was just like, I learned by actually doing. Yeah. It wasn't taught at school. Everyone went and did a paper round, but it's like you'd work 3 times as hard for me washing one car.
But the difference was the paper round was the safer option, whereas what you were doing, you're having to knock on that door and potentially being sworn out, told to go away. And so, but at the same time, when you really want something, I often was like, with the marathon analogy, just at that point when you hit the wall where you're kind of like, it's almost like you're tested. Do you really want this? Because there's going to be a challenge that comes up. And I think when you were saying as well about thinking businesses in difficulty, they've kind of got to knock on that door. They've got to reach out to somebody for that help. And it's even harder because you've got that shame, or you don't want people to know. And so I do understand. And also because you've got to try and make sure you speak to the right person. So, you were saying you might knock on a door and, the person can't help, or they're just thinking, oh, brilliant, what can I get out of this? And so there is, it's like, again, anything in life, you've still got to, I don't know, like you're saying about when you were doing your, the car washing, you were meeting people, making contacts and talking to people. And it's that kind of, isn't it? In business, you make contacts, you meet people, you soon learn who is a decent person.
But there's that sense of intuition, and there's a sense of this learning. And I guess my point is that we're not taught it. No. So we're not taught to start, and we're not taught to stop, and we're not taught to what do we do with failure. And you are figuring it out as you go along. And even as you said, when a business is failing, you're figuring that out as you go along with all the pressure attached to it. Yeah. And feel that there's no one in your corner. Because if everyone's wages are paid and everything else and the lights gone off and everyone's asleep, the business owner's going, okay, I've got the next month and the next month and the next month, and that's got to come through, that's got to come through, that's got to come through. And it's just understanding that I don't believe that the whole smorgasbord of business is taught in schools, and I believe it should.
I agree. And that's the thing as well, when running your own business, you don't switch off. People say go and have a rest, switch off, but you never switch off, because you are, like you say, you're thinking, where's the next payment coming in? What am I doing next? You're thinking about your employees, who often become like family, and there's so much more to it. It is a way of life, isn't it? Yeah. And that is potentially why when it goes wrong, it's even worse than losing your job, because it's part of who you are.
100%.
It is that way of life. But again, I really believe that if you speak to the right people and they can say, look, can you see this is that, that point in your life where everything will change. Yes, it's the worst, but there's only one way up from here.
Yeah.
And it's speaking to the right people. And I agree with you, like teaching it in schools. But, so when I was a business advisor, I was working for, at the time, it was government, basically, government funding. We didn't talk about insolvency or closure, and I get it because you want to be optimistic. But, like Gareth said, sorry if I'm saying all the things that Gareth's going to tell you.
No, it's all good.
But, so the insurance, you don't want to ever use it. You hope you'll never use it, but you get it just in case. And as a business owner, if you know, like, right, this worst case scenario, so I do this all the time, like, right, worst case scenario, I'll go and get a job back in teaching and blah, blah, I've got my, this is the worst case.
Yeah.
And then this is the better one. This is the better one. And then this is best. So all the time I am scenario planning for my business in my head, but that's in my head. And it's so refreshing having somebody to talk to especially if you can do it like at an early stage, because like you said before, there'll be more routes around the mountain, and the more expertise you can access, the more people you can talk to, the more options that will be there for you. And so it's only when, you sort of feel like actually there's only one way and I don't want to talk to anyone and I'm just going to shut down. But, I think one of the things, looking back how it affected my mental health, and I think the number of people, especially men, who, choose to end their lives, and I think that's because they feel there's no other option. And I just would love for people to see this or hear this and think, do you know what, I'll just pick up the phone and I'll try speaking.
And I mean, that's probably the best thing that you said there in terms of guys or whatever that are running something and not knowing there is a way out, and not knowing that you can have that conversation with someone. Because generally, I got aware of you guys because we were on the entrepreneurial journey or whatever. So I've learned a whole load of stuff just hanging out with you guys, and knowing that when COVID happened and the whole country shuts down, you're like, well, what is this going to look like? How are we going to get through all this? But having been through the process of you working on your brand and stuff like, knowing that there is life, and the thing is you want to keep people in business, kind of gives you confidence to say, well, it can be tough, but just keep going. And however which way around the mountain, at least I know some people that could help us navigate when we need them. And for me, that's half the battle, knowing that you've got people around you that you could, if you needed to, talk. And I think those guys or even girls even that just end their life without the conversation, and you're thinking, because there's all the other stuff that you've got to deal with.
Well, because I think it's like the shame, but and just what people will think. But in reality, so many people like right now are in debt but people just aren't honest or open about it.
Yeah.
But and that's it. It's just it was making me smile when you said, because we met at the beginning of our entrepreneurial journey. There was a chance that we weren't going to make it as well. We're so grateful to be here today. But like I say, as we were thinking this morning how far we've come from, like, say, with raising babies and, having children, trying to run the business. You've got things like recruitment and staff, and, there's so much going on. And I think that's why, especially men like business owners, they just feel like they need to be strong. Yeah. And that it's okay. I can handle this on my own. And often their partners or aren't aware of quite the severity of the situation. And so I'm really grateful that you asked me to come and talk on the podcast, because other people have reached out to like, oh no, we don't want to talk about that. Like they might have a big a following, say on LinkedIn of business owners, but they'll do social media strategy or how to convert on LinkedIn, but they don't want to talk about this side. And I just think such a wasted opportunity.
But for me, the podcast is called the Purpose People Podcast, right? And sometimes you'll live out purpose, but the vehicle that you're living it out in may change, or it might pivot. Yeah. But the point is, for instance, if you are able to, let's say you're the electrician, right? And you're going through that business, and that electrician journey is struggling or whatever. And you think, well, I was meant to do this, be an electrician and and now I failed at it. But they speak to you, they might then spin it up differently in the way that they could going forward and still live out that dream, just maybe with a bit more knowledge, a bit more wisdom, a bit more clarity, a bit more learn all the mistakes and not going to make them again. Then they can live it out. And I think for me, that's why it's so important, because when people see something fail, they think purpose is at its end, and hence why they take their life.
Yeah.
Because they just see, well, if I can't do this, then I can't do anything. And then you go, well, hang on a minute, you can, but maybe not in this vehicle. Let's help you.
Yeah.
Then that changes the conversation.
And it's not, more than likely, it's not even anything they've done wrong. Like everything about business, yes, you've got to take chances, you've got to plan things, but there's an element of luck as well.
Yeah.
You know, like who saw like Brexit and COVID? Yes, you might have been able to pivot, but maybe you couldn't, you know. So actually, that's a hell of a lot of pressure that people are putting on themselves when, you know, the fact that you even tried to start a business and give it a go in the first place should really be commended. Yeah. You know, and yes, when you say that we might be able to sort of close the business and start again, you know, that business might have a slightly different name, or like you say, you take but really, yes, there are other options afterwards, and getting that out to people. Caveat, it's not like you deliberately do it, but the point of it is that purpose can have its many forms. It'd be like, the best analogy I go is, you're a footballer, you're a kid, you've played football, you've done football trials, you even got into the academy, you might have even made it to a first team appearance, let's say, but then you get injured and you can't play football ever again. What do? Give up the love of the game completely? Or do you look at it and go, with the knowledge I have from those 10 years in the academy or whatever it had been, I could maybe educate the next generation coming through. And so therefore then your purpose is helping others get further than you. And you still have that purpose and exactly that, and
you're still working in sport.
Yeah, and the business owners that have been through the, closure, so some form of insolvency, the advice that they can give to other businesses coming through is also invaluable. But when you were saying about purpose, I think that's why Gareth and I, we never, like you say, going back, we never thought we'd end up running an insolvency practice. But in reality, we are both purpose driven. Like, we wanted to make a difference. Like, where we were working or places we'd worked before, people became numbers. It wasn't what we really expected or what we wanted. And so, and I read this thing the other day because I was like, I'm really driven. I've got a purpose in life, and I know I've got 4 children, and I absolutely love my children, but I have got a purpose, and I just don't feel I'm fulfilling it. And someone said exactly what you just said. It's like, well, maybe your purpose. We need people like you who are purpose driven in the NHS, in police, in running businesses, in all walks of life. Yeah, because you're making a difference to other people in ways that maybe it's just not how you probably envisaged.
100%.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think it sounds, because I'm not saying you should call your business this or whatever, but it's almost like you're guardians of purpose, in a sense that if it doesn't work out, you can help them rescue it where they think all is lost. And I think, for me, I'm helping people discover purpose and then making sure that they stay on track and build it. It's almost like you're helping people once they've discovered it and maybe it's not gone to plan, help them pivot through the journey and then carry on in line with that purpose. And for me, you're right, you need those people in every sector, because there are people there are going, you know what, I could do this, but I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to go for it. But what you don't want them to do is, because through, I was talking to someone the other day, they had 3 businesses go down on them in the last 6 weeks.
Wow.
One owed 60, one owed 30, one owed 10. How they survive, it's just like, they're like, I've done nothing wrong. We've actually done the work. They've just not paid us.
You just owed that much money.
They just owed that much money. And I'm like going, naturally then you go with a bit of experience. You're like, well, why didn't you get 50% up front and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is maybe they were great at selling the story or whatever else. Yeah. And, they've just ended up into that situation. But the rescue there is that going, don't give up. You're an exceptional person in what you do. So let's try and help you get to where you need to get to.
And let's face it, off that amount of money, you're never going to make the same mistake. You will be getting that 50% up front. And you can say to people, this is the reason why. Yeah. This is what happened to me in the past. So when people say, so it gives you that more, when you sort of, as you get older, you get a bit more confident, that confidence to say, can I have 50% up front? Yeah. And this is why. Yeah. You've actually got a reason rather than just, because I think when you first start out, you do feel you have to get used to asking people for money. And often if you are like that, say purpose driven, or you just like helping people, it can be quite hard.
Oh, 100%. Even I've sent you a quote. Can I turn it into an invoice? I've just invoiced you. And it's like, yeah, thanks for that. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, I send you that invoice. Do you mind paying it? You know, like those sorts of things. So for me, it's a journey, right? It's a journey of having the right people in your life to give you the confidence to operate. But as I said, when the setbacks come, you've got people around you that can, you know, help you navigate that.
And sort of like the people with, it's that, you know, back to the mindset as well, because you need people who are, you know, the sort of people that always come up with ideas and looking for opportunities, but also people who will take concrete action to actually put things into place. There's no such point in coming up with ideas unless you kind of ground them into real action. And so again, you know, we've talked before, and you know, last year I did some extra studies. I did a master's, but
just a master's.
Well, it was because.
No, it's great. It's awesome. It's just the way you said it. I did a little bit of study. I was thinking you were going to read a book or something like that. I just did a master's.
I mean, with the kids, with the kids in the business, I think Gareth was, you know, not too sure what I was saying. But the point was, I really wanted to make sure that even doing what we're doing, we were doing it the best way.
Yeah,
you know. So Gareth's an insolvency practitioner, but running the business in the best way. But what I learned from that, and it was amazing, we did a whole module on like building your network and who you've got in your networks and the importance of that and the reach. And I was like, that was stuff that I took for granted. I love talking to people, so I've got a good network. But actually they were teaching people how to create and establish networks. And that for me was like a really big thing. And, you know, that as well as, and I say, go back to balance, that what we need to do is be a bit kinder to ourselves, because everything in life is a balance. When you're making, you know, so if you're making loads of profit, are you paying your team enough? You know,
of course.
Everything.
You can never pay your team enough.
But well, the same for you though, as a business owner. I bet you all the business owners that we see, I'd say literally all of them have underpaid themselves to make sure that the business can continue, or they can, you know, pay their team. So I just think those things are the fact that we were learning them at university at master's level, and yet you're expecting someone who's just started up their own business for the very first time to know this. And
this is the thing, you know, we're talking about, like, we got to bounce back better, we got to do this together, we got to transform the world, we got to do this. It's like, but where's the education? That you're not giving the education. And I think I always use this compare and contrast between the UK and the US. The US do have a culture of personal development. Yeah. Generally. So they buy the house, they buy their car, and they will invest in themselves personally. As a country, we educate at school or to a high level, and then we stop. Yeah. And there are massive gaps in our knowledge. Now, if you get personal development, a lot of what we're talking about, they're educating. Where in this country, we don't. And then when they go and buy a book for £15, it's a lot of money, isn't it? You know, and for me, it's like, we've got to break this at a young level to bring a generation of people up with the right knowledge to shape the country, to turn it around. And it's purpose-driven people that inspire that change by saying, look, we're prepared to take the risk. We're prepared to take the risk on people coming through, and galvanize them to say, look, it's one thing to moan about the economy, but the second thing is you need to invest in you to make a difference. And I think going to university, studying that little bit extra, knowing all this stuff, like networking, it's not taught. I don't know anyone that teaches it. You know, I'm in a network, I've been part of a network, but I stumbled across it just in a conversation. I met someone and they said, oh, you heard of networking? And I was like, well, let me show you there is actually an education process behind it. And so I got educated. And then I was like, oh my gosh, so you don't walk into a room then and sell to everyone. No, that's the worst thing you can do. So these are the things that have helped me. As you said, the strength and the journey and the ability to carry on has been as a result of knowing lots of people to find a solution.
To find your way through, And exactly, you know, I just think that if any sort of business owners, whether you're struggling at the beginning of your journey or just at the high point, having a network of people around you that you can talk to is fantastic. And I think it's fun. So we really enjoy talking about the business. That's the other thing. You've also got to find people, because you're talking to your own family, they tend to get a little bit bored.
No, exactly. But that's the thing. It's about having the right people around you to be able to do the right things. And I think for me, it's about conversations and regular conversation. And it's great about talking about startup. It's great talking about finances and stuff like that. It's great talking about refinancing, but it's also great to talk about, look, we're going through some tough times at the moment. What are my options? Yeah. And I think that's great of having yourself and being connected to people that are out there that can produce the support. So if anyone is listening, these guys are great to talk to if you're going through a tough time, because they can show you where the options are ahead of time, rather than it getting to a really stressful position whereby you might say, well, I don't know what else to do. And we clearly don't want anybody to do anything stupid. We just want people to see, and to be fair, it might not be stupid, because it might be you feel that's the only option. All I can say is there are many other options other than that one. Yeah. So, yeah.
And the majority of people we speak to, actually, interestingly, so we don't charge for that initial call, which I think is really important, because you worry about you're going to spend more money. Yeah. But 80% of the people we speak to, we give them the advice and they carry on. So brilliant. That, I think, actually is probably the statistic, like the hopeful statistic within there, that by picking up the phone and having that conversation, we can put people in touch with appropriate assistance, or just with a little bit of somebody to talk to. It gives them that kind of motivation and that strategy to move forward. So that's the hopeful statistic at the end here. And as I say, if I agree. If anyone does listen to this, then just pick up the phone.
How would they get hold of you? What's the best number to get hold of you?
Our number is 01823. So we're Taunton based. We're in Somerset, and we're 216156. So, but you can pick up the phone, or have a look on our website. Just that's great.
We'll put the details on the screen below, so you can have a look at. But it's a really important subject to talk about. So thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Darryl. Good to talk to you. Cool.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Purpose People podcast. How you can help us is to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Google and Amazon. That helps us get our message out there to help people go after their dreams, double down on it, and be successful in life on their terms.